Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2023, and the full game has been released so we can do our first experiment of the new game. And of course it is the traditional first experiment on the channel, the experiment where we give a non-league team pretty much unlimited money to try and climb up the football pyramid and hopefully challenge for the Premier League title. Probably going to do it a little bit different today and do the entire experiment in one episode, so it might be a little bit longer than usual, but we'll see how it goes. And the team that we're going to use today is Worthing. I picked Worthing mostly because they've got fish on their logo and are sponsored by Rabbit. Why not? They're an animals themed sports team from the looks of it. And what we've done is taken the team that is currently, at least alphabetically, at the bottom of the Vanarama National League South. So they've got quite a few leagues to go if they want to make it up into the Premier League. And they're probably going to need quite a bit of money to actually do that, as well as quite a bit of time with all the financial fair play rules that now exist in the game. Now, the way that you do give a team unlimited money is through the in-game editor. It's a little add-on that you can buy from Steam. I think they've put the price up this year, which is a little bit annoying because they haven't made too many changes to it. But one of the changes which is helpful for this experiment is that they've actually allowed you to change income and debt through the in-game editor, when usually you'd have to use the full game editor to be able to do that. So maybe that's why it costs an extra £1 to get the download this season. Who knows? Still seems a little bit cheeky if you ask me. But what we've done with Worthing is we have boosted their bank balance. Now, I've not given them £1 billion this time. That's what I'd normally do, is give them a neat £1 billion and see how far they can stretch it. But often that would be attacked by tax and wouldn't be good enough for financial fair play to allow the club to grow. So we've still done that, and we've given them a front-end sugar daddy to make sure money keeps pumping in. But making the most of this new income screen in the in-game editor, I've also given them a new kit sponsor which will pay them £250 million every single year, and this will be legitimate income which will allow them to spend up to £250 million every year on transfers or on wages or on upgrading the club, which should allow them to grow within financial fair play quite easily. And I'll just renew this money, it's fixed value, renew the income, it will keep coming in, and they'll keep on getting that same amount of money every year. So that should mean that they'll be able to really develop quite quickly and break past those financial fair play restrictions. But the game very rarely works as simply as that. The computer isn't great at spending the money we give the teams in this experiment, so we'll have to see if that is how it works out. But we'll jump forward about 5 years now and see if they've managed to get out the Vanarama National League South. Well, we are now 5 more years into the future, and you can see in their very first season with the new money, they did manage to finish 6th, which was a pretty good place to finish. They then managed to finish 2nd the following season and get promoted, and immediately finished in 2nd place in the Vanarama National League as well, but that wasn't enough to make it into the Football League, sadly. Then in the following season they finished 7th and then in 6th, so they were up near the top of the Vanarama National League, but not yet able to make the breakthrough in the various competitions. Now, if we have a look just at how they did in the cup competitions as well, you can see the season seemed to go pretty well for them before getting knocked out by Borehamwood in the FA Trophy 5th round replay, and then they did lose in the playoffs 2-0 to Braintree in that first season. But you can see in the second season they absolutely stormed the league, did really well in the FA Trophy again, but once more lost in the fifth round this time, so one extra round against Notts County. And then in the playoffs they did manage to get past Farnborough and then get past Dorking, who I think I did this experiment with a couple of years ago, so a little throwback to an earlier experiment there. In the Vanarama National League it went very well again. Obviously this is the season that they finished 2nd, didn't make it quite as far in the FA Trophy this time, and in the playoffs, despite winning in the semi-final 3-1, they were ultimately beaten 1-0 by Scunthorpe at Wembley in front of 38,000 fans and did not make it through. And then the following season, another decent FA Trophy run, although 3rd round not very decent, but they did make it into the FA Cup 3rd round before being beaten 2-0 by Bradford City, which is a shame, and once more in the playoffs, knocked out by Cambridge there. And then in the most recent season, we can see yet again, they made it to the FA Trophy quarter-final this time. No proper FA Cup run, and once more beaten in the playoffs, this time on penalties. So hopefully this season, they'll have a much better go of it. If we just have a look at their transfers, you can see despite £250 million coming into the club, they only spent £12,000 on transfers in that first season. Lots of players coming in on frees. But not a huge amount of money. 115k the next season was a bit better, but it all went on one player. Then 20k the next season, 18k the season after that, still relying on free players coming in, and then still only 5k the year after that as well. If we have a look at their senior squad, and maybe have a look at their wages as well, we can see here the wages, some of them, I mean, Cyrus Christie here is on 44 grand a week in non-league. That is ridiculous amounts of money. Where's he come from? He came on a free from Hull when they were still, when they'd just been promoted into the National League, I think that is. And he is giving them value for money, over a 7 average rating, but that is a lot of money, 44 grand a week in non-league football. So the money is clearly being spent on wages here. A couple of other players, Caden Jackson on 15 grand a week, 33, not bad if you can get it in the Vanarama National League, but they're attracting players from quite high up, but maybe not quite spending the money as wisely as they might like. Another player here from Crystal Palace. I mean, he's worth a good amount of money, so maybe a worthwhile investment, but they're giving them so much in wages. They must be smashing other teams in the Vanarama National League. If we have a look at Aldershot as a comparison, and just have a look at their senior squad here, you can see 1,300 a week. So Worthing have one player that earns probably double what the entire Aldershot Town squad gets, and that seems to be where their money must be going, because if we have a look at their finances here, you can see they've still got £500 million in the bank. They've got a massive transfer budget they're not using, a massive wage budget. As always, the sugar daddy has retreated to be an underwriter, but they do still have this money coming in from their kit sponsor. Just have a look at their landmarks here, and this is where you can see, I mean, it's stadium seating capacity increased by just 330 seats. Terrace conversions probably reducing the attendance there, and you can see they have upgraded their training in youth facilities. Youth categories gone up, and that was when the owner scaled down the funding. So looking at their facilities, they are improving, but they've got a little bit of a way to go still. But they do look like they're starting to build and get into a position where they might be able to get into the Football League proper. So this time, let's go probably 10 years ahead and see if they've managed to make it up the Football League a bit further. Well, you can see they're definitely building a real club here from where we left off. Before, in the 2027 season, I think we were in, so it was when they finished 6th here in the Vanarama National League. They did win the Vanarama National League the next season, made it into League 2. Steady mid-table finish their first season there, then up to 6th in the playoff area, but not quite getting out, and they were flirting in that top half of the table, even finished 4th again the next season before ultimately winning the Sky Bet League 2, finished 18th, a little consolidation season, and then won Sky Bet League 1 as well. So they're getting promoted by winning the league at the moment. I think every year that they've gone up, and they've done it by winning the league actually. Oh no, 2nd in the Vanarama National League South. But now they are a championship club, so they've gone up pretty swiftly there. If we have a look at that senior squad schedule from where we left off before, you can see they were storming in the Vanarama National League. In the FA Trophy, they also made it into the semi-finalists of the FA Trophy, but unfortunately couldn't get past Colchester at the end there. But it was enough to make it into Sky Bet League 2, into the Carabao Cup for the first time, but out to West Brom in the second round. Papa John's Trophy for the first time as well, but out to Chelsea under-21s there, out in the FA Cup second round as well. And you can see this is one of their consolidation seasons here. Following season, a little bit of progress in some of the cup competitions, but not making a lot. And then Crawley in the playoffs. Unfortunately, that home defeat came back to cost them, and they couldn't turn it around in the second leg. The year after that, not a lot really happening there. That was pretty dull. And then they seemed to improve a little bit the next season. but it still wasn't enough. And I think this is the season where they finally got out. They've also made it through in the Carabao Cup here to the 5th round, which is a pretty good, to the quarterfinals, where they lost 2-1 to Newcastle. And even then, they were still in it right to the death as well. And then finally in the playoffs, unfortunately, they lost on penalties to Stockport. But this is the season where they won the league. You can see all the little green circles here demonstrating their winning prowess this season. They also made it into the Papa John's final, but unfortunately were beaten by Hull in the final. So they definitely strengthened their team that season, expanding to be able to compete with Championship and potentially Premier League teams as well. Following season, first season in League One, definitely a consolidation that year, not much progress in the cup competitions. The year after that, they were doing much, much better. And I think that's when they got promoted right up into the Championship as well. No great cup run there, but then in their first season in the Championship and the most recent season, you can see smashed 6-1 by Arsenal there. They got the likes of Nottingham and Forest and West Ham, West Brom, Hull, all down here in the Championship. So a tricky season for them as they finished, I think, fairly low down that season. Let's have a little look at where they did finish. And Worthing were in 7th, actually. Not a bad place to be. Just missing out on the playoffs there by 1 point, which is pretty unfortunate. How did they do in the last game of the season? A 4-0 defeat to West Brom, who took their place in the playoffs. So they lost 4-0 at home. That would have been such a great game to end the season, but then getting smashed 4-0. What a shame for them, as they failed to make it into the playoffs. Now, if we have a look at their transfer history, hopefully they are now spending some of that enormous sums of money that they're getting. You can see they went from spending just $5,000 to spending $675,000 on players coming in, $135,000 the year after that, and then finally breaking the $2 million barrier to bring in Marcus Brown from Oxford. Spending reined in a little bit after that, and stayed quite low for a little while, actually, just 170k here, 375k, but then £3.9 million spent, probably when they made it into the Championship. And then in the most recent season, £44 million spent on players, 22 million on Matovu from West Brom, 12 million on Aaron Riley from Southampton. So they're definitely opening up the checkbook finally, and you can see they've got players just about to break that 100 grand a year ceiling that they've got. Mark Donnelly, the highest paid of them, came in from Norwich in the Premier League on a free, and now earning 100 grand a week. Peter Rachovic also earning nearly 100 grand a week. He came in on a free as well, so they still love those free transfers. If we just have a look at the two that they paid an awful lot of money for, Derek Matovu, how much is he on? He's on only 31 grand a week. He's a bit younger, but £22 million for a Championship player there. Definitely paying quite a lot. And Aaron Riley coming in from Southampton for 12.5 and did not do that well. He's on only 7 grand a week. So they seem to be prepared to pay a lot for the player and then not pay the wages, or get the player on a free and then spend a huge amount on the wages. But I mean, there's some high wages there at the top, but otherwise they're not crazy high. The sort of thing you'd expect, I imagine, of a team trying to get into the Premier League. Because if we have a look at West Ham, who did get promoted, and some of the players they've got, they've broken the 100 grand barrier, and they have more depth as well to their wage structure, a lot more players on that 30-40k mark. So maybe they've still got a little bit of a way to go in order to break into the top of the Championship here. If we just have another refresh of their landmarks from the 2027 season when we left off, you can see they did move to Broadfield Stadium, which has a 6,000 capacity. That was a temporary relocation. New chairman came in, capacity was increased, put a grass pitch down, upgraded their youth and training facilities twice, and again for a third time. So stadium capacity increased to 7,000. So they are investing some money in their facilities. You can see they've got great training facilities and good youth facilities, and they're due to move to a brand new Worthing Stadium in 2 years' time with a nearly 18,000 capacity. And if we have a look at the club details, you can see that reputation up to 5,000, attendance up to 8,000, It's still a stadium with twice their maximum club attendance, so their fans aren't coming out for Worthing despite all the money they've got. Still got a third of $1 billion in there, still got 250 million coming in every year as well. So that money is going somewhere, but where, I am not too sure, because they're not spending that much on salaries and transfers. But let's go forward another 10 years or so now and see if they do make it finally into the Premier League. Well, we're another 10 years forward. It's the year 2047 now, and you can see in the Championship it did take them some time to get out of there and into the Premier League. After that first season of promise, when they finished 7th, they then dropped down to 18th, 9th, 14th, 12th, and then finally through the playoffs, finishing in 5th, getting into the Premier League, where they managed to survive 2 consecutive 17th place finishes before finishing bottom, and then more recently finishing 3rd in the Championship. So if we go back and just have a look at the first seasons from when we left off, obviously there's not a lot to look at here in the Championship because they didn't really hit the playoffs, so we just keep an eye on those cup competitions. But they also were not going very well, as they had quite medium approaches in those competitions. FA Cup this time, they did manage to make it all the way to the FA Cup quarterfinals for the first time, but beaten 2-0 by Arsenal, who are their bogeymen when they do make progress. And then the next season again, another little FA Cup run before going out to Blackpool of all teams. Not an ideal finish there, but I think this is a season where they did manage to get through the playoffs. And you can see that little Carabao Cup run, knocked out again by Arsenal, Man United that was, who knocked them out in the Carabao Cup. And then in the playoffs, despite going 2-0 down at home against Middlesbrough, they managed to come back and win it 3-1 with a stunning first half, and then relying on penalties to do the job. A very exciting penalty shootout as well. That swung different directions throughout the whole penalty shootout. And then in the final against West Ham, despite going down to 10 men after 37 minutes, they managed to hang on and win the penalty shootout in front of a sold-out Wembley. An excellent way to do it and to get into the Premier League. But you can see it wasn't going too well for them in the Premier League. Not many victories in there. They did beat Manchester United at home 2-1 though. That's a famous win for the club. Out of the FA Cup quite early. They also managed to beat Chelsea 2-0 at home. So a few highlights in there, but somehow managing to stay in the Premier League despite a terrible record. And then the following season, a few exciting wins in here against Manchester United at Old Trafford, no less. A really big victory there. A draw at home to Man City as well was quite nice to see. And then beating Arsenal finally 2-0 away from home with 10 men as well. Really embarrassing for Arsenal, that one, as they managed to stay in the Premier League once more. But the following season, it was much worse, despite that victory over Chelsea and then a little run of 3 victories in a row here, including away at the Emirates. They ultimately were relegated back down to the Championship, and you can see in the Championship they did make it back to Wembley for the playoff final, and despite again getting through on penalties, they were defeated this time in extra time. Hayden Mead with a 96th minute goal to send them into the Championship for another season. And then the following year, FA Cup, they managed to get into the 5th round, and then once more in the playoffs. Despite getting past Burnley, they were beaten 1-0 by Middlesbrough at Wembley. So they're up and about there. They're one of the yo-yo teams at the moment. Still no real silverware in there. If we look at their competitions overview, you can see Sky Bet League One, the biggest trophy they won, 3rd place in the Championship. Otherwise, is up there when they won the playoffs, is what I think they're trying to say there. And if we have a look at their transfer history, we might get a little bit of insight into why they aren't quite progressing. 22 million spent this season in 2037-38, that was. Following year, 56 million spent, but 67 million going out the club. Matovu, they flipped a good profit on him. But £15 million on player, highest player that they brought in, 72 million the next season, so some decent money spent there. Very little going out, 49 million, and then 91 million pounds spent this season. I think when they were in the Premier League, including 24 million on one player, 63 million the next season, 64 million the next season, 76, and then 72 before finishing more recently on 48 million. So they're spending that kind of 50 to 70 million range now. A few big signings in there, but not really breaking that 30 million barrier in any one season. So there is money being spent, but not a huge amount. And look at these wages. They've actually got some play. They're not even matching the highest wages they had when they were in the Championship the first time here. They do have a bit more depth to the squad now. Some players worth about 30 million, 40 million. But it's still not filled with superstars, this squad list. And the wage structure seems much more reasonable as well. So they're not blowing the bank at all. And they actually failed the financial fair play in 2037, the season when we left off last time, which is interesting. I don't know how they could fail financial fair play given they've got $250 million a year coming in. If one of you have a theory on how that happened, let me know down below. But they did move to the new stadium, kept upgrading their facilities. They actually moved to the Brighton Community Stadium, which has 41,000 fans. That's a temporary relocation that moved there as they increased the stadium capacity to 28,000 and moved back to their home ground. And they've definitely upgraded their facilities as well. So top corporate facilities, superb training facilities, excellent youth facilities, and a 28,000 seater stadium. So they're a proper established club now with the right facilities. In terms of their finances, decent amount of money. I do not understand how they've failed financial fair play. They've even got more money coming in, a general sponsor of 100 million a year, parachute payments, still got their $250 million coming in. I might even add another 300 million on that just to give them as much money as you possibly can to try and get into the Premier League and stay there and maybe even challenge, who knows. But at the moment it's a little bit disappointing. They're sort of flatlining here. So let's go a few more years forward and see if they can break into the Premier League with a bit more cash coming in through their income. Well, we are 10 years further forward for the last time, I think, and you can see they really have flatlined to become a yo-yo club. When we left off, they'd finished fourth in the Championship. The following season, they finished fourth again, but finally, at the third time of asking, got out through the playoffs, only to finish 18th and get relegated. They then bounced around in the Championship again before finally getting up and finishing 19th. And since then, they've been around 8th and not really progressed much since we left off. So this tends to be what happens with these experiments these days. We can just have a look. You can see beaten by Middlesbrough when we left off last time. No cup competitions the year after, but they did beat Swansea in the final to make it in to the Premier League. They did manage to beat Man City 1-0 away from home, Man United 3-2 as well. They love beating the big clubs but cannot do the business against everybody else, and they ultimately got relegated once more. No cup success in there. And yet again, a very good season in the Championship when they made the playoffs again, but were beaten by Middlesbrough, not even making the final that time. And then again, this is the season I think they finished second in the Championship. Very good unbeaten run at the end there to get them up into the Premier League once more. And they did make the Carabao Cup quarter-final, but lost on penalties, sadly, against Brentford. FA Cup, they managed to make it into the fourth round, but lost to Leeds. And ultimately, they got relegated once more. So it looks like there's not really any cup success for the club this time around. And if we look at the most recent season here, they're also not going back to the Premier League after finishing in 13th place. So that's a real shame that they haven't managed to do that. Just very quickly look at the kind of money they're spending. They did have a couple of seasons where they spent over 100 million, which is encouraging to see, but 144 million this season, but it's not quite the kind of money you would expect them to be spending, given they've now got $500 million a year coming in. If we look at their wages again, very similar to where we left off before, 73k at the top there. They do have some players worth a bit of money. Jack McCallion, the main one, he's worth up to 57 million, signed for 26 million from Swansea. But it's just not quite kicking on in the way that you would want to see. If we look at their facilities, you can see they've still got great facilities. The stadium's the same as well. In terms of their club details and finances, you can see they've got $500 million. They've got the income here of nearly $500 million coming in a year. An underwriter for an owner. And in terms of the landmarks, very little happening here at all. There's just nothing that's happened in the last 10 years, really. So they have become an established Championship team. One of those ones that occasionally finishes towards the top and can get promoted, but it doesn't happen very often. Now, I'm just going to try and have a look at whether there's something in their club details that might explain what's happening here. So I am now the manager of Worthing. If we have a look at their finances, this is what I'm interested in. I mean, that balance never gets over 100 million. It just sort of ticks around a bit. If we look at their income, you can see that they do get these huge peaks of income that come in every year. In terms of where the income comes from, I mean, why is it not coming up with $250 million of income here? Or $500 million of income even? I don't really understand what's happening there. Is the club not giving them the money? I mean, they're spending nearly 100 million on transfers and wages combined. But for some reason that kit income is not showing up in sponsorship. Sponsorship of 22 million. They do have seasons where they get a lot of money coming, but it's still not $1 billion. So maybe they aren't getting this money? But then why would they have got promoted so much? Why do they have a 1.5 million wage budget? And it's very confusing. Theories in the comments down below, because they've clearly benefited from money coming in, but it's not the money it's supposed to be, and I don't understand why that would be the case. So theories down below if you know why that's happening. Maybe the new mechanics don't work. Who knows? But they do seem to be benefiting from the money, just not quite in the quantities they're supposed to be, which is very strange. Very, very strange. Total income of 150 million last season, and 67 million of that was from players sold. 24 million came from the owner. So I don't know what's happening there. Maybe the game doesn't work despite the increased price on the in-game editor. But if you do know why, let me know down below. If you did enjoy the experiment, drop a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe for more experiments to come. But until next time, see ya.